By a vote of 98-2, the Senate yesterday agreed to advance legislation to fund the Homeland Security Department. And joining us from Capitol Hill this morning in the Russell Rotunda building is Senator James Lankford, a Republican of Oklahoma, and one of the 98 that agreed to move forward. Senator, let's start with why you decided to vote yes.
This is the same vote that we've taken 4 times already. The last 2 weeks, Democrats have been filibustering Homeland Security, saying they didn't want to debate the issue at all until they got the bill exactly as they wanted before the debate started. That's a little odd for Senate procedure. Senate procedure is you actually open it up for the debate and then you amend it. So this is actually the 5th time that we brought it up, that we were glad the Democrats actually voted to say, let's start debate on this now. And it's a little late to start it, obviously, with just 2 days left before Homeland Security funding runs out, but we're glad to actually be able to engage in the debate now.
Democrats did so. They agreed to this because of assurances from your majority leader, Mitch McConnell, that the language blocking the president's executive action on immigration would be stripped out. Do you agree with your leadership's 2-vote solution here?
Yeah, well, the issue becomes not whether you agree or disagree with leadership, it's where we are at this point. By the way, I have tremendous respect for Mitch McConnell. He's dealing with a very difficult situation at this point because we are strongly passionate as conservatives and as Republicans about funding Homeland Security. That's why the House passed this a month ago, basically, to fund Homeland Security, but to not fund the president's actions and his executive actions. So we're at a strange spot at this point. We have a strong belief in national security and protecting the nation. Terrorism is on the rise. That's extremely important to us. But the Constitution is also extremely important. No president, Democrat or Republican, can take actions that are inconsistent with the Constitution and not cause a constitutional problem. And that's where we are.
Final vote will be today on a so-called Homeland Security funding bill. How will you vote? That
I'm holding on to at this point. I can tell you I have real concerns, as I mentioned before. I have concerns that this is a constitutional problem. The president has done something that is clearly inconsistent with his constitutional authority. Judges now have also stepped in and said the president has exceeded what was his legal ability to do. So now we have the judiciary saying this is inappropriate. We have the House saying it's inappropriate. We have the Senate saying it's inappropriate. The president's trying to find some way to be able to press on through this. This is a bigger issue than immigration. That's the problem. We have to be able to resolve this, both with Homeland Security and deal with the constitutional issue. When they look back 20 years from now at this time period, the conversation won't be about Homeland Security or immigration. The conversation will be about the Constitution, what happened at that moment, and how was it protected.
Well then, Senator, what's the end game here?
The end game is to fund Homeland Security. That's been pretty clear. You won't find a Republican out there that doesn't want to fully fund Homeland Security. You also won't find a Republican that doesn't say we've got to solve the issue with the Constitution. So that is the difficulty that we face at this point. Congress has very few levers. We have things like the nominations process. We have funding. We have very few levers to actually deal with the protection of the constitutional powers. It is ironic. I mean, the president sees this in some ways the same way. It's ironic the president vetoed the Keystone pipeline earlier this week, saying Congress was impeding into his powers, that he didn't make a decision, yes or no, about Keystone. He just said Congress can't do something that's executive power in making that decision. It's ironic that the president can slide by on that, but when the Congress steps back and says, you know, we have the same authorities, we have to deal with these issues, that somehow gets spun a different direction, but that's the nature of it.
If push comes to shove, Senator, would you support some sort of continuing resolution that keeps Homeland funded for 6 weeks or so and take this fight up again?
Sure, be glad to. Yeah, we have no desire to see any kind of shutdown in Homeland Security. The problem is the very small number of levers that we have in this process and constitutional issues. So we're going to use what we have, but our passion is to be able to fund Homeland Security.
All right, let's get to calls. Mike is up first in Washington, Oklahoma, a Republican. Mike, go ahead. You're on the air with Senator Lankford.
Good morning, Senator Lankford.
Good morning, Mike.
We're happy to have you as our representative, and I certainly voted for you as senator.
Thank you.
However, right now I'm quite angry and disappointed with what's happening. Congress's fundamental power is the power of the purse.
Right.
That's your real leverage over what's happening. And you're caving in by splitting this into 2 bills. And by the way, they say the one is the clean bill. That's certainly a bad name. It's the unclean bill because it still allows for the immigration problem. It's not clean, it's unclean. The president will simply veto the second bill. Hello? What are we missing here by splitting it into 2? All we're trying to do, I think, is cover our tail in Congress saying, well, we tried, but we didn't make it. The president vetoed it. Am I missing a point here by splitting it into two bills?
Mike, you're not missing a point on that. That's the challenge that we have right now, trying to walk forward on this, and that's been my issue all along. We have to find a way to be able to limit the president's powers. You and I agree in all likelihood on the issue. We want to fund Homeland Security. That needs to be funded. There are issues that we need to deal with our own security in the United States. That's not the issue. The issue is immigration. So we're trying to keep our eye on the ball. What can we do to limit the president's ability to be able to exceed his constitutional authority, whether that be selection of nominations, whether it be defunding areas that we can defund, whether it be the judiciary. I'm grateful that the judiciary has stepped in last week and has stated very clearly the president exceeded its power. There's a stay on the president's actions. Right now, regardless of how we fund or don't fund Homeland Security, the president's authority to actually fund that illegal action has been stayed. The courts have, so that stops at this point. Now the issue is, how do we deal with Homeland Security, and how do we continue to put the barriers around the president that he doesn't exceed his constitutional authority?
Senator, that call from one of your constituents, can you let him and others know when you will decide what you're going to do on this final vote today on a so-called clean Homeland Security funding bill, and what goes into your thinking?
Sure. Yeah, you have to deal with the bigger picture. As I mentioned before, this is not just a short-term issue. This is a long-term constitutional issue for me. So I've got to deal with some of my colleagues in the House and in the Senate. We're going to walk through this, and we're trying to see what are the next steps. This is not a one-step process. This is a multi-step process. And I understand full well the frustration that people have with leadership in the House and with the Senate, but I'm going to tell you they're working extremely hard in trying to keep a focus on one thing. How do we deal with the president's illegal action and not hurt others in the process?
Senator, do you think the Republican leadership, Mitch McConnell, and the Speaker, John Boehner, are they coordinating well on this?
I don't know that the House and the Senate ever coordinate completely. They're two separate bodies, and I understand people say they're both in the same Capitol, so they should coordinate all the time. The Senate has a responsibility, the House has a responsibility, and they should keep each other informed, and I do think they're keeping each other informed, but each body operates separate from each other.
John in Great Falls, Montana, an independent caller. Hi there, John. You're on the air with the Senator.
Hi, Senator Lankford. Great respect goes out to you and your colleagues. I watched your career in the Congress, and a question for you is the rule of law. Watching the hearings yesterday, there is no more rule of law coming from the Democrats on the opposite side. They always want to try to obfuscate what the rule of law is, and without the standing in the court, how quickly is anything ever going to get done anymore? That's my question. How quickly is any good legislation ever going to be passed?
Yeah, that is a great question. It's a great frustration that we have in Congress. Congress, in the past, debated issues. The Senate used to be a place where we voted all the time, and the main focus was protecting the rule of law and advancing the rule of law. If you go back to a great Democrat Senate member, Robert Byrd was always on the floor of the Senate challenging the executive branch, saying you're exceeding the authority of the executive branch. Even if he agreed with the president, he would say, you can't do this. This is Congress's responsibility. As a Republican now, I'm still actually in the same mode. You can't do this. So whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, we have to honor the rule of law. It's what makes us one of the greatest nations in the world. Some consistency in our law. And when this president or any state can just step in and say, I know that there's public opinion, so we're going to ignore the law and ignore enforcement of the law, it sends a very bad message worldwide and within the United States.
Senator Lankford serving his first term in the Senate, previously representing the 5th District of Oklahoma, serving 2 terms there before heading over to the other side of Capitol Hill. Serves on the Appropriations Committee, Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs panel, as well as the Select Committee on Intelligence Affairs. We'll go to David, Sanford, Maine, independent caller. Hi, David.
Greta, I want to make a comment to C-SPAN after I get done with the Senator. Senator, I know you're trying hard, but you have to understand my question.
Okay.
I'm going to teach Greta and you a constitutional issue. All bills emanate from the House of Representatives. You are just there for advice and consent. You don't like the bill coming out of House of Representatives, you send it back. Somehow it got changed around here. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the Senate makes bills. And Greta, last Saturday you had an issue on about policy about Rudy Giuliani, what he said to the president. Please do not bring up personal issues about a person again on C-SPAN. The most nasty things from both sides were put on C-SPAN. You should stay away from personal issues. Talk about policy. Thank you, and have a good day.
All right, David. Senator, go ahead.
Sure. David, you bring up an interesting question, except let me complete the statement. All bills of revenue actually originate from the House. This is one of those bills of revenue. It's an appropriations bill. The House of Representatives passed it. They had multiple amendments. They sent it over to the Senate. The Senate's actually tried to debate this, bring it up for debate, which is the normal rule. The Senate has the power to be able to amend any spending bill that comes from the House that did originate in the House. We've actually tried to bring this up for debate for the last 2 weeks, and Democrats have blocked us every time we brought it up until yesterday. So that is the power of the Senate, to be able to bring up a revenue bill coming from the House, to be able to amend it, to be able to send it back. The House can then amend it and send it back, and we can volley back and forth as long as it starts in the House, and this one did.
On our line for Democrats, Donald, Shreveport, Louisiana. Hi, Donald.
Hi, how you doing?
Good morning. Go ahead with your question or comment for the senator.
My question is, the senator just said that this is a revenue bill. Why in the world would they tie a revenue bill to a bill for immigration, which is not generally a revenue bill? Also, why wouldn't the Republicans come up with a viable bill for immigration over the past 7 or 8 years, instead of waiting until now, until the Homeland Security is up for refunding, and tie it to that bill?
Okay, Senator, let's take that point.
Sure, that's a great set of questions on that. Let me say a couple things on it. One is, it's normal for appropriations bills to have different policy, what are called policy riders in them. Most every appropriations bill you ever see will have all sorts of ways that it actually designates, here's how money will be spent. Every time you direct money or say money won't be spent for something, you're actually directing the flow of the federal government. It's one of the primary ways it does its job, is directing this is a priority, this is not a priority in spending. This is one of those issues. Now, the key thing at this point is all of Homeland Security is fully funded in this bill and has been fully funded in this bill. The statement is the president can't execute an executive action, especially right now when the courts have already said, no, the president can't do it. The Congress is also saying the president can't spend money to do that. So that's a normal part of the appropriations process. As far as an immigration bill, everyone knows that the Senate did work together to be able to establish an immigration bill. The House actually had 5 different bills during the last session that worked its way through the committee process, but the House's process is very different than the Senate. The House wants to take up things a section at a time. For instance, border security, interior security, get that resolved and set that aside. Work your way through the process systematically, because immigration, as America knows at this point, is incredibly contentious. If you try to do it all at once, there's too much to discuss in too many areas of immigration, so we want to take it a slice at a time and work our way through trying to solve it.
Arnett in Alabama, independent caller. Hi there.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing
well.
Doing very well as well. Welcome.
It's great to talk to you guys, and thanks for C-SPAN. Well, I have a comment and a question. My comment deals with executive orders, and one of the most infamous executive orders was the Indian Removal Act that removed Indians out of the Southwest, out of the southeastern United States to Oklahoma, in which Congress defunded it, and also the courts deemed it illegal, but Andrew Jackson did it anyway, because Congress couldn't defund the Army. That was my comment. My question is concerning a lot of issues, but specifically Keystone XL pipeline. Why can't it be taken along as existing route and then be increased capacity on this existing route that has already been approved?
Okay. Senator?
Yeah, let me deal with a couple of those questions. You have actually hit the nail on the head when you deal with Andrew Jackson and what happened during that time period with the relocation of Native Americans from all over the Southeast into Oklahoma, my state, is one of the darkest moments in America's history. When we literally grabbed people and said, we want your land and we're going to move you out, they were then moved to Oklahoma. Then, by the way, their issues continued even in Oklahoma with the relocation of Native Americans there. So it is one of those issues that America looks back on and says, that was bad. We can't do that again. There will be future individuals that will look back on this season and say, has the executive branch exceeded its authority? Has it pushed that even farther? As far as the Keystone Pipeline, there has been an expansion. The southern leg of the Keystone Pipeline from Cushing, Oklahoma, my state, to the Gulf Coast, they've actually added to that leg and tried to broaden it. We have a tremendous amount of oil coming from what's called WTI, West Texas Intermediate, that's coming into the Cushing area in those pipelines and then coming all the way to the Gulf Coast for a refinery. What they're trying to do is add additional capacity to come in from Canada. You may know there are already 2 pipelines just like the Keystone that come in from Canada, from that same area, from the tar sands, that come into the United States for refining. One of them goes to the Gulf Coast. One of them actually goes to Chicago, Illinois for refining there. This would add a 3rd pipeline to that area. That's why it's been so confusing. The previous pipelines took about 24 months to permit. This one is over 6 years in waiting. And we're trying to figure out why this one's so different than the previous 2, and it's really not. It's from the same area of Canada. It's coming to the United States for refining capacity. There's nothing unique about this pipeline. We have thousands of miles of pipeline across the United States. It's a normal way to move oil. It's the safest and least expensive way to move oil, in fact. And so that's the confusion on the Keystone and why the Congress is continuing to push back the president and say, you're not answering yes or no. You're just saying, wait, I'm thinking about it. After 6 years, how long does it take to make a decision about a pipeline?
And President Obama vetoing that legislation, the majority leader saying a vote to override that will take place Tuesday next week. Senator, do you think there are enough votes to veto?
You know, I can't tell at this point. We didn't have enough votes in the original vote in the Senate or in the House to be able to override the veto. I think the president's very aware of that in his statement. Again, I come back to his statement was very unusual. His statement wasn't, I disagree with the Keystone. His statement was that he feels like Congress is stepping to something that's an executive authority, which I find very ironic in the middle of this debate about immigration, where we obviously feel like the president is stepping into a congressional authority. We're trying to respond back to that just as he is with his veto.
Back to that debate. Don in Kingston, Pennsylvania, Republican.
Hi, thanks for C-SPAN. I have a question. As far as I know, I believe that the Senate or Mitch McConnell has not reinstituted the nuclear option.
That's right.
And if I'm right about that, I really cannot understand why the Democrats are filibustering the bill at all. Because as far as I can see, there's 54 senators, and it's not going to pass with that vote. So why are they filibustering it? And one other thing, I think that this decision is entirely too large for one man to make on his own. 5 million new workers in the United States will not have to take jobs supposedly that Americans won't do. They will be able to take anyone's job.
Right.
And that's my question.
And that is why this is a congressional responsibility. When you deal with immigration policy, it's clearly stated in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution that immigration naturalization responsibilities, that's a responsibility of Congress. That's one of those clearly enumerated powers. And when the president steps in and says, I'm going to just make 5 million new workers in the United States, there are veterans right now that are coming back from war that are looking for jobs that are now going to compete with people that the president just made new workers in the United States that could compete for any job. I'd like to see individuals within the United States compete for those jobs first. Now, I'm not opposed to having individuals come from other parts of the world to be able to work in the United States as long as Americans have that first opportunity. Every immigration law in every country around the world is the benefit of that country. We should do the same thing in the United States law, deal with immigration. All immigration laws are designed for the benefit of our country and of our nation. So we have to resolve that. And this is an issue larger than any one president. That's why the Founding Fathers put that responsibility into the hands of Congress so the American people will have more input into it.
Bill is a Republican in Cortland, New York. Go ahead, Bill.
Hi. My first question is Homeland Security. Is that not responsible for the protection of our borders, including the people coming into the United States from other countries and all the airports and everything, the ports and ships around the world coming into the U.S.?
That is correct. You've got all of our Border Patrol. You have all of our TSA. That's why this funding area is so important, because it deals specifically with that area that the president exceed his authority, but it also has a lot of other areas into it as well that deal with our national security.
Senator Lankford, we want to thank you very much for your time this morning. Thank you for talking to our viewers. Appreciate it.
Oh, you bet. Glad to do it.